Hello everyone, I'm Ashley of the Silver Bay Public Library, and I am back once again with a read aloud of our story Floors by Patrick Carman. We are almost done with this fabulous book, so without much further ado, I think we're going to jump right into the action so that I don't leave you guys waiting longer than necessary. But we are on chapter 15, the 13th floor. As many of you know, 13 is normally an unlucky number, so let's see what kind of mischief they're going to get up to this time around. Alright, let's go. The alarm on Leo's watch went off at 5:30 in the morning, but it didn't matter. He had awoken with the first light of day to find the note stuck to his bedpost. I thought Mr. Phipps could use a look at the ghost orchid. Hope you don't mind, Dad. The box was gone, and for a moment Leo worried he might need it for something, but barring that, he didn't plan to ask for the flower back. Mr. Phipps would know how to care for it, and Leo's dad was right. It was the perfect gift for a displaced gardener who'd had his garden ransacked. Leo turned off the alarm on his watch and adjusted his position in the duck elevator. He knew he had to be there at 6, as the message had said, but there was no reason to wait. He might get sidetracked by some other duty, or Miss Sparks might try to kick them out of the building on sight. Better to hide in the duck elevator and make sure he didn't miss the appointment altogether. It was an appointment, he was sure, that would not be offered twice. At 5:47, Leo heard Miss Sparks come into the lobby and make some keys for what he did not know or care. A period of silence followed, and then, precisely at 6 o'clock, the duck elevator moved. Leo did not pull the lever or press the button for the roof, but either way, those things would never have made the elevator move as it did now. Now this was something new. The duck elevator was moving sideways, not up or down. It was in fact moving parallel to the lobby under the grand staircase Leo had climbed many times. The duck elevator stopped, and when it did, a section of the back wall slid slowly down, revealing 4 buttons and a frosted sheet of glass. "Here we go," said Leo. The finger was back, writing a message on the cold frosted glass. "These buttons you only push once. Push them wrong at your own peril." Leo felt supremely excited as he read the message, because he knew that his journey with Remy had given them the knowledge only they could possibly have. The only way a person could know the order in which to push purple, blue, green, and white buttons would be if they had 4 boxes to match. Leo had gotten the boxes in a certain order. He knew which button to push first, and so he did. Purple. The elevator moved abruptly sideways once more, this time in a different direction. Leo pushed the next button. Blue. The elevator moved again, lurching, to a stop. Green was pushed, and the elevator moved once more. "Only one button left," said Leo. He wished Remy were with him, or at least Betty, Blop, or Merle, the flying goat. He felt suddenly very alone in the world as his finger hovered over the white button. And then he pushed it. The duck elevator began spinning in a circle, then it shot up through the Whippet Hotel as fast as the double helix had ever gone. Leo put his hands on the low ceiling and braced himself. Either the duck elevator was about to stop, or they were going right through the roof into the air. The duck elevator did stop almost as suddenly as it had started. The number 13 appeared above the 4 buttons with the sound of a bell. "But there's no floor 13, Leo said. But even as he said it, he knew there had always been 13 floors. He'd simply never been invited to any of the secret floors or the very secret floor at the top. Leo took a deep breath to calm himself, threw open the duck elevator door, and crawled out into the room. He stood up but did not speak. Overhead he saw the bottom of the pond, which he now realized was made of glass. He could see the duck's feet flapping and the fish swimming. Light poured in through the pond, filling the 13th floor with a dreamy golden hue. There were books everywhere, on tables, and endless shelves winding this way and that. There were long, lazy-looking couches and overstuffed chairs. There were huge beanbags, some pink like a pig, and others black and white like dairy cows. Colored rings of every size drifted near the ceiling, held by some unknowable magnetic force, and flying holographic farm animals swooped high and low. But mostly there were books. Lots and lots of books. "It's the library," Leo found himself saying, for it was indeed the Whippet Library, where Merganser came to think, and think some more. A perfectly silent train made its way around the wide perimeter. There was someone on the train, and Leo knew right away. He was dressed in black, which was not his normal attire, but it was him. There could be no doubt. "Welcome to the 13th floor," said the man. "I hope you like it as much as I do." "Mr. Phipps?" asked Leo, because it was none other than the gardener himself. "Oh. Thank you for the ghost orchid. I was hoping you might let me have it." "You're welcome," said Leo, because he couldn't think of anything else to say. "And now I have something rather important to give you, something that was left in my care." Leo was so confused and amazed he just stood in the library, gawking at the gardener, unable to speak. Mr. Phipps took a leather case out of his black jacket and unzipped it. From inside he pulled a silver chain, and on the end of the silver chain sat the Whippet Hotel's sole silver key card. "Is that?" Leo began, but he couldn't finish. "Merganser D. Whippet's silver key card? The one that unlocks every door, even the many hidden doors?" "Yes, it is." "Why do you have it?" asked Leo. Mr. Phipps took a piece of folded paper from the same leather case and held it with the key card in one hand. "You love the Whippet Hotel, don't you, Leo?" "Of course I do." "Then take the silver key card." Leo reached out his hand, not really sure what it meant to have the key, and then took the paper with it. "Put the silver key card around your neck and the paper in your pocket," Mr. Phipps instructed. Leo hung the chain around his neck and put the paper in the front pocket of his maintenance overalls. "What's the paper?" he asked. "Why, it's the deed to the Whippet Hotel, of course. Why else would you have the silver key card?" "The what?" Mr. Phipps looked Leo in the eye and smiled. "Leo Fillmore, you own the Whippet Hotel. At least for the moment." Leo felt as if he might stop breathing. Could it really be true? No, it could not. Something wasn't right. "Who gave you the authority to give me the Whippet Hotel? Only Merganser can do that, and he's missing." He hated to say the next part because he really liked Mr. Phipps. "Did you steal the silver key card from Mr. Whippet?" Mr. Phipps was a patient man, but there were things to be done and little time to do them. "Climb aboard. We've got someplace to be." Leo didn't know if he could trust Mr. Phipps, but there seemed to be some plan in motion, and he certainly didn't know of any other way out of the Whippet Library. Stepping into the train car and sitting down, he asked the gardener another question. "So you're the mysterious Mr. M? It's you who's been following me and Remy around all this time, scaring us half to death with that finger of yours." "Helping you, and keeping Captain Rickenbacker entertained, which is no easy task, let me tell you." "But why?" Mr. Phipps wouldn't answer as the train followed a track that wound higher and higher until he had to duck in order to miss the ceiling. Or did he? Was the ceiling a hologram too? It would appear so, because they went right through it and came to a hidden station on the other side. "You'll have to get out of the train now," said Mr. Phipps. Leo stepped out onto a lonely platform where a set of stairs led up into darkness. "Up there you'll find your way," said Mr. Phipps. "He's a crafty one, so be careful what you say. Good luck." The train pulled away, disappearing down into the Whippet Library, and Leo was alone. "I wish Remy was here," he said, climbing the stairs until his hand bumped up against the ceiling. He pushed and light poured in. If Leo could have seen the world from the other side, he would have watched as a square of grass on the roof opened up and a boy peeked out. "Over here, and make it snappy. You don't want to make Mr. Frescobaldi waiting." "Mr. who?" said Leo, stepping out onto the roof and letting the trapdoor slam shut behind him. There was a short man standing before him who he had never seen before. "Come here," said the man, waving Leo on. "This way, he's waiting for you." Leo saw the ducks in the pond, though Betty wasn't there. He thought about whistling 3 times fast and calling her, but what good would having a duck by his side do? "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me who you are," said Leo. The man hesitated and seemed poised to tell a lie. My name's Milton. Satisfied? Now please, come quickly. This will all be over before you know it." There had always been a small outcropping of trees on the roof in the far corner, away from the pond. In amongst the trees was a stone bench, and on the bench sat Bernard Frescobaldi. He had on a long gray coat with the collar turned up, black glasses, and a black fedora. He was staring out over the city. "Who are you, and how did you get up here?" asked Leo. Leo didn't know who these people were, but he didn't like the idea of 2 total strangers on the roof of the Whippet. The man in the long gray coat would not turn around, but he signaled with his hand, and Milton came near. Leo watched as they whispered, then Milton delivered the message. "We understand that you have the silver key card and the deed to the hotel, and we have an offer for you." Leo was on red alert, and thought seriously about calling Betty or running for the trapdoor. Mr. Phipps was a traitor, probably in on the deal with Miss Sparks and whoever these 2 were. "You give us the silver key card and the deed," continued Milton. He coughed as if the next thing he was about to say was going to hurt. "And we will give you $50 million. Leo's jaw dropped. $50 million? He had no idea how much the Whippet was worth, but $50 million would mean a lot. His dad would never have to work again. He could buy Remy and Pilar a real house. He could go to college. Still, if the Whippet really was his, didn't he have an obligation to protect it from a wrecking ball, and more importantly, from that awful Mrs. Sparks? Leo watched as the man in the long gray coat whispered to Milton once more. It's falling apart anyway, Milton went on, and you don't know how to run a hotel. We'll offer $50 million, not a penny more. Little did Leo know that the land the Whippet sat on, not to mention the countless treasures inside, was worth at least 10 times that. But the truth was, it didn't matter. No amount of money was going to get Leo to give up the Whippet Hotel. He'd already made up his mind. He belonged here. He wanted to stay. You're standing on the roof of my hotel and I want you off, he said. Both of you. I love this place and you can't have it. Milton looked stunned as the man in the long gray coat stood up abruptly. He still would not turn around, and Leo had just about had it with whoever this guy was. He whistled 3 times fast, hoping to get some help from a duck, and then Milton started smiling. I told you this would happen. I told you. Leo whistled 3 times again, and this time he heard Betty quacking, but she would not come. If you did anything to my duck, you're in big trouble, said Leo. Betty is busy, said the man in the long gray coat. What did you say? Leo asked, not because he hadn't heard, but because he knew that voice. She's laid her eggs and is going to have babies, yelled the man in the long gray coat, and he threw off his hat, which revealed a wild whip of hair that simply would not stay down no matter how hard he tried. He turned, and it was not Bernard Frescobaldi, for there was no Bernard Frescobaldi. It was Merganser D. Whippet, as it had always been. Merganser? Leo gasped, first smiling, then laughing and running and hugging his old friend. The one and only. Me, and only me. And did you hear the news? Betty's having babies. It was just like Merganser to be excited about a duck, but Leo had to admit the timing couldn't have been better. There had been a lot of talk about mothers lately. Merganser grabbed Leo by the hand and hauled him down the path of trees, then sat down, clapping his hands. You see there, she's built her nest. No wonder Betty had been cranky all week, Leo thought. 6 eggs, said George Powell, for Milton wasn't Milton either. He was George, Merganser's oldest and dearest friend. Leo, meet George. We've got a lot to talk about. It seems so, said Leo, who still didn't believe any of it. Merganser talked and talked and talked, as Merganser was known to do, so it was hard to get a word in edgewise, but Leo tried his best. First of all, Merganser said, you passed. I had my doubts, really. I did. Ask George, he'll tell you. I thought you might give up, but you took everything I threw at you and kept on going. Even that last part, which I simply had to do. You passed that one, too. Leo didn't quite understand, so George tried to explain while Merganser went to congratulate Betty. I've always stayed away from the hotel, which was by design, because Merganser knew this day might come, a day when he would have to leave the Whippet and move on to another, more pressing matter. I must say I had my doubts as well, but now that I've seen you in action, my doubts have completely vanished. It was one thing to find out the boxes and overcome so very much. We thought you had that in you. But to say no to so much money when you really could have used it? Well, that was the most important thing. That was why we had to do the things the way we did. But I still don't understand, said Leo, turning back to Merganser. You can't mean it. You can't really want to give me the Whippet Hotel. Oh, but you're wrong, Leo, Merganser replied. I do want to give you the hotel. I can't keep it. Too much to do, too many places to go. You're the only one for the Whippet. But what about Mr. Phipps or my dad or Miss Sparks? Even Leo couldn't believe he said her name, but she was the hotel manager and she had pulled the wool over Merganser's eyes for a long time. Leo, listen to me, said Merganser. It's you. You're the one. No one else will do. Don't you see? But Leo didn't see. He simply couldn't do it. Merganser took a long silver pen from his coat pocket and held out his hand for the deed to the Whippet Hotel. Leo gave it back to him. We have a lot in common, us two, said Merganser. We both lost our moms too soon. We both want to remember, but there comes a day that we have to move on. Merganser D. Whippet signed the deed over to Leo and handed the paper back, winking at George as he did. And we both found that a true friend can help carry us through lonely times. Am I right, George? So true. Remy, Leo thought, thinking of his new friend and wondering what he must be going through. His mom didn't have a job and his dad was a no-show. They might not even be able to pay the rent. You have the silver key card now, Leo, and that means you can open any door. Not just the doors in this hotel, but all the doors you're going to find for the rest of your life. Leo held this silver key card in his hand. Will you be there to help me? He asked. It's an awful lot to look after. You'll see me once in a while, and George too. Don't forget, you've got lots of help if you know where to look. Leo had some thoughts about that, and suddenly he couldn't wait to get cracking on all the problems plaguing the hotel. There's a lot to fix around here, said Leo. Speaking of which, we have some business to attend to. Merganser got to his feet and pulled a whistle out of his pocket, blowing it twice. What sort of business? Asked Leo, running up behind him. House cleaning. Leo felt a tingle in his toes at the idea of what Merganser D. Whippet might be talking about. And that was actually the end of chapter 15. The last chapter was going to be chapter 16, All Is Revealed. So without further ado, we're going to dive right in and finish off the book. If there was one thing Leo could say for sure about Merganser D. Whippet, it was this. The guy knew how to make an entrance. It began all the way up on the 7th floor where he donned his hat and glasses. He knocked on all the guests' doors, and each time he turned away and flipped a coin up on the coat so that his face could not be seen. The collar up on the coat so his face couldn't be seen. It's time already, one of the guests said. I trust everything went as planned. Yes, everything exactly as we planned it, said George, whom the guest knew only as Milton, Bernard Frescobaldi's driver. Meet us in the lobby, won't you? I look forward to concluding our business, Mr. Frescobaldi, said the guest, but Bernard was already gone. Down the stairs until he had summoned every single guest to the lobby. He had set Leo ahead to find his father, and the 2 maintenance men waited at the bottom of the wide staircase, as Merganser D. Whippet, fully disguised as Bernard Frescobaldi, strode down the steps. Miss Sparks saw him first. Who on earth is that? She said, one eye on the mysterious man in the long gray coat and one on the front door. She seemed to be pondering whether or not to run, though it was hard to say why. There was something about this man she recognized. Merganser reached the bottom of the stairs as the guests started arriving, some by the main elevator, some by the stairs, all of them curious. I'll have you know that mornings are my best writing hours, said Theodore Bump. You may have just cost me 5,000 words. This better be important. Captain Rickenbacker was not a morning person, and he arrived with his red cape tucked into his trousers. Has anyone made coffee? Was all he asked. The Yanceys huddled together in their matching black silk pajamas, completely confused. Lillian Pompadour sat hiding on the floor, where he promptly peed. Pilar! Miss Sparks yelled, and it was only after she heard her own voice that she remembered she'd fired the maid the night before. She looked around the room, and her eyes landed on Leo. You, clean that up. Yes, ma'am, said Leo, who always carried a can of carpet-cleaning foam and rags in his tool bag, just in case. Is someone going to tell us why we're here? Asked Mr. Yancey. If not, I believe I'll go back to my room. I'd like to make sure nothing gets stolen. It was a jab Leo didn't like to hear, especially from a paying customer at the hotel he now owned. Merganser had remained quiet, seated in the darkest corner of the lobby, but now he snapped his fingers. His best friend in all the world came down the stairs. George Powell? Said Miss Sparks. What are you doing here? Miss Sparks was alarmed because Mr. Powell never came to the hotel. She'd only seen him in his private legal office 7 blocks away, and even then very rarely. Who's George Powell? You mean him? Asked Lillian Pompadour, pointing at the short man arriving at the bottom of the stairs. That's Milton, not George. Miss Sparks smelled a rat, looking at the door once more, and came out from behind the check-in counter. What's the meaning of this, George? Miss Sparks demanded. I believe I'll let him tell you, George said, pointing to Merganser. When he did, Merganser threw off the disguise and everyone gasped, for they all knew who it was in an instant. My apologies for gathering you all so early, but I'm afraid it was unavoidable, Merganser began without the slightest hesitation. Miss Sparks was utterly speechless, and George Powell unlocked the hotel door, and Mr. Phipps came in, back to looking every bit the gardener. I'm only here for a moment, and then I must go. This time for good, said Merganser. Just a few loose ends to tie up, then I'm off. But you're not Mr. Whippet, said Lillian Pompadour. You're Bernard Frescobaldi, and he's Milton, your driver. I'm afraid not, said Merganser, looking at all the long-term guests. He'd walked over to Theodore Bump, who had been with the hotel for 2 years running. As Bernard Frescobaldi, Merganser had called Mr. Bump on several occasions, offering money for causing chaos at the hotel. Each time, Theodore Bump had refused. Keep writing those books, said Merganser. I'm a very fast reader, you know. I do hope you'll stay on after I'm gone. Keep Plop out of my room and you've got a deal. Merganser glanced at Leo, who nodded. Done, said Mr. Whippet. Leo had finished cleaning up after Heine by then and stood next to his dad, wondering where this was going. And you, said Merganser, stopping in front of Captain Rickenbacker. What will the Whippet do if you don't protect us from Mr. M? Bernard had called Captain Rickenbacker to the gate on 2 occasions, asking for dastardly favors, but Captain Rickenbacker had never wavered. You can count on me, said Captain Rickenbacker, saluting Merganser enthusiastically. Merganser bent down and picked up Heine. Lillian Pompadour had been itching her way toward the door, but when Merganser picked up her dog, she stopped. Give me my dog and I'll be on my way, she said. Miss Pompadour, you were all too willing. My husband has a lot of money, more than you, I'm sure, she fired back. He might just buy this hotel right out from under you. Merganser handed Miss Pompadour her dog. She held him close and looked as if she might cry. Then why did you do it, Miss Pompadour? Why did you agree to sabotage the hotel? Because you said, Bernard said it would drive down the price. You said we could own it together. But Lillian, said Merganser, far too kindly for someone who had totally betrayed him, you just said you could buy it out from under me. No, that's not true. I said my husband could buy it, said Lillian, and then she began to cry, holding Heine close to her chest. My ex-husband, if you want the truth. But Merganser already knew about that. It was why he knew Lillian might betray him, but he also knew the real reason why, and this softened his heart. Where will I go? Asked Lillian. The Whippet is the only home I've got, and I'm all out of money. It's just me and Heine now. You love the Whippet, don't you, Lillian? Asked Merganser. I do, and I'm sorry. I'm very, very sorry. Captain Rickenbacker put an arm around Lillian and patted her gently. He petted the dog because the two of them were close friends. I could use Heine, said Captain Rickenbacker. He's a good sniffer. And I see a marvelous story here, said Theodore Bump. It could be my biggest seller yet, but I'll need to interview the young lady. Lillian Pompadour brightened at the sound of the word young and stepped a little closer to Mr. Bump. She looked at Merganser as if he'd held her whole life on a delicate string. Merganser glanced once more at Leo, who nodded very slightly. Of course you can stay, said Merganser, de-whipped. But you'll have to do some work around here. No one gets by for free. Lillian beamed, but it was the last straw for Miss Sparks, who had watched the proceedings with increasing comfort. You must evict her, Mr. Whippet. She can't be trusted, she yelled. None of this lot can be trusted. This hotel has become a den of liars, scoundrels, and reckless, rude children. I will not stand for it. Merganser was a gentle soul, but every now and then, when duty called, he could be a lion. He walked up to Miss Sparks, looking down his long, elegant nose as she leaned away from him. He stood so close the beehive pointed toward the wall behind her, and then he spoke. I don't want to alarm the guests, but you, Miss Sparks, are fired. You can't fire me. I'm the hotel manager, she shouted. Merganser snuck his hand into her jacket pocket and pulled the long diamond necklace out slowly. My necklace, said Nancy Yancey, snatching it away from Merganser almost before he could get it all the way out into the open. Everyone gasped at once, even Mr. Phipps, who was nearly unflappable. Mr. Fillmore, would you please escort Miss Sparks out of the hotel, said Merganser. Clarence Fillmore was the biggest man in the room by a country mile, and before Miss Sparks knew it, he was standing at her side. You can't fire me, you can't, cried Miss Sparks. Actually, you're right about that, said Merganser. I can't fire you. Miss Sparks looked momently triumphant, holding her head high. She might prevail over this weakling after all. Leo, have you got the key card and the deed? Asked Merganser. Leo came to the middle of the room and pulled out the rarest of the Whippet key cards, and Miss Sparks nearly fell over backward. Mr. Fillmore knew about the card, too. They all did, and none of them could believe Leo was holding it. But how? Miss Sparks stammered. You are all witness here, each and every one of you, said Merganser de-Whippet. I hereby sell the Whippet Hotel and everything in it to Leo Fillmore for the price of... He glanced back and forth around the room until he saw the thing Leo held in his hand. I sell the Whippet Hotel and everything in it to Leo Fillmore for the price of 1 bottle of carpet cleaner. It was all theatrics, but Leo handed Merganser the bottle of carpet cleaner, which was then handed to George Powell for safekeeping. Leo held up the deed for everyone to see, and then he looked up at Miss Sparks. You're fired, he said. Miss Sparks started taking things off the check-in desk, anything she could put her hands on. The appointment book, the pens, pads of paper. Mr. Fillmore took them all back, one by one, and ushered her to the door. Leo smiled from ear to ear. Could it get any better? He didn't think so, as Miss Sparks screamed on her way out. This won't be the last you see of me, Leo Fillmore. Merganser de-Whippet looked at George. How did I ever manage to hire that woman to begin with? You see the best in people, said George, but I'll admit you have to look awfully hard to find anything good in that one. She can be quite deceptive. Merganser leaned in close to Leo and gave him a piece of advice. Know thy enemy. Leo nodded because he understood. Miss Sparks would do almost anything to gain back control of the Whippet. Maybe it wasn't really the last time he would see her. A stillness invaded the lobby, and Merganser ushered everyone into the puzzle room, where he had one more surprise before his departure. This one is for you, Mr. Phipps, and you, Captain Rickenbacker. He took a black keycard out of his pocket, swiped the surface back and forth, then back again with his elegantly long finger. and the puzzle pieces began to rise into the air. All 800,000 of them. It was like a puzzle snowstorm over the long table, and everyone laughed. How? Asked Mr. Phipps. I could tell you how each piece has its own magnet, said Merganser, and I could tell you about the complex system of magnets in the table and throughout the room, but let's just say it's a bit of magic, shall we? Works for me, said Captain Rickenbacker. Merganser swiped the black keycard again, and pieces started to fall into place. The room filled with the sound of snapping as thousands of puzzle pieces locked into place. Leo thought it was the most spectacular thing he'd ever seen. When it was done, there were indeed 223 ducks, including Betty and the other resident ducks, all 6 of them waddling toward a bright green pond. There were trees and a blue sky, the grounds with their giant topiaries, and the Whippet Hotel right in the middle of it all. Not bad, said Leo, not bad at all. It had been the most magical of mornings, but Leo still had a certain emptiness inside that he could not shake. He tapped George on the shoulder, hoping for one last favor. I wonder if you might play the part of Milton one last time, asked Leo. There's something I need to find. There's someone I need to go find. I was hoping you might ask, said George. He donned his driving cap and bowed to the new owner of the Whippet Hotel. After you, sir. And they were off. And that was the end of chapter 16. I thought chapter 16 was the last chapter, but it seems that was wrong. So we're going on to chapter 17. Goodbye for now. Leo stood in front of a door that reminded him of how thankful he was to be living at the Whippet Hotel. The building in which the door found its home was not cared for the way a building should be. Leo had spied hundreds of things he would have liked to fix on the way up, and he was sure there were thousands more. If I owned this building, it would be in much better shape, said Leo. That's the spirit, said George. Maybe you will own it one day. Leo looked across at his companion and wondered how that would be possible. Better knock. Time's a-wasting, George encouraged, and so Leo did knock, softly at first, and then louder because he was so excited. When Pilar saw him, her eyes brightened. Leo, how did you? She seemed to let the question go as it trailed off, suddenly happy for her son. Romelio is going to be so happy to see you. The hotel is all he talks about. Pilar let them in, and Leo's heart sank a little. She had done her best to fix up the one-bedroom apartment, but there was only so much a mom could do with cracked windows, ancient appliances, and holes in the wall. You've really fixed it up nicely, said George, holding out his hand. I'm George Powell. I work for Mr. Whippet. Oh, said Pilar, not sure what to make of the small man before. Are you here for the necklace? Are you here about the necklace? No, said George, feeling terrible for having worried her so. That mystery has been solved and it has nothing to do with you. We came for a different reason. Remy was in the postage stamp-sized kitchen, slurping down a bowl of cereal when they came around the corner. Hi, Remy, said Leo. Remy was so excited to hear Leo's voice, he flipped around in his seat and knocked the cereal bowl over, but he didn't care. None of them did, because Leo didn't waste any time spilling the good news. He told them about Merganser's return, Miss Pompadour, and Miss Sparks. I knew she set us up, said Remy, so excited that he had hugged his mom right in front of everyone. When Leo told him he'd inherited the Whippet Hotel, Remy flipped on an old kitchen radio set to a Spanish station, got up on the kitchen table, and started dancing. He does that sometimes, said Pilar, equally excited, but less showy. Why am I not surprised, asked Leo, and then he asked Pilar a very important question. Pilar, will you please come work for me? He was hiring his first employee, and it felt good. And live at the Whippet Hotel, too. You can have Miss Sparks' old room. Pilar started to breathe funny. Stand back, said Remy, still dancing, only even more excitedly now. She's going to lose it. Pilar started to cry, then she started to dance, her hands over her head. Pretty soon they were all dancing, even George Powell, who was not known for letting his emotions get away from him. In the end, they decided to leave everything behind, get in the black town car, and depart the old apartment without looking back. Leo promised to send a moving company to get each and every last thing so they could decorate Miss Sparks' old room and make it their own. Pilar sat in the front seat with George, talking about her plans to make the maid service more efficient. George was immediately impressed with Leo's first hire. Leo and Remy were in the back seat, whispering to each other. Is there a 13th floor like I thought? Asked Remy. There is, I'll show it to you. So that's where you'll stay then? You and your dad on 13? Leo had thought a lot about this. No, it's not that kind of room. It's all secret rooms at once, and a library too. You like libraries, said Remy. I'm happy for you, but where will you stay? We maintenance men like it in the basement, where we can see all the action, said Leo, and it was true. For Leo, the basement was the heart of the Whippet. It was where he and his dad belonged. Thanks, Leo, for everything. You're the best friend I've ever had. Leo pulled out the silver key card and showed it to Remy. Ditto. Everything you just said times 10. Merganser was making his final tour through the lobby level of the hotel. when he met Remy for the first time. He took a good look at the boy, tapping him once on each shoulder, and declared him the Whippet Hotel's temporary doorman until school started again in September. "You'll need someone to help you pass the time," said Merganser. "I know how boring it can get now and then." Merganser had changed into a more appropriate iridescent green jacket, that was 2 sizes too large. He put his hand inside one of the green pockets, milling around as many objects clanged together, and pulled out a little robot. "This should do," said Merganser, holding it out to Remy. "Blop! I thought I'd never see him again." "Take good care of him for me, won't you?" asked Merganser, a wisp of a tear in his eye. He was coming near the end, and it was proving harder than he thought it would be to say goodbye. "Of course I will, and I'll take care of Leo, too. Don't you worry about a thing." That was it, then. The tears were falling, and Merganser turned for the double helix in one last meeting with the new owner of his hotel. Leo was waiting for him there, as he expected, holding the small orange door open. "One last time, just for fun?" "One last time, just for fun." 2 people never laughed and screamed so loudly as Leo and Merganser de-whipped on the way up to the roof. It was too short, of course, but neither of them would forget it. The ride was always best when it was the 2 of them together. "I think Betty will need to stay with the eggs," said Merganser as they peeked around the tree and saw her nesting. "Shall we take the others on their walk?" "Yes, sir," said Leo, "and don't you worry about that thing. Betty is very responsible. She'll be a good mom." "I believe you're right," said Merganser, but it was still hard for him to leave without seeing the ducklings hatch. Mr. Whippet smiled at Leo, thinking once again what a good choice he'd made. They hailed the duck elevator and shooed all the ducks but Betty inside, then crammed in with them. It was a very tight fit, especially for Merganser, whose knees touched the ceiling of the elevator. All the ducks stared up at Merganser inquisitively. "My, but I love a good duck. They will be missed." "If you keep talking like that, I'm going to think you're never coming back," said Leo. If he was hoping for some reassurance, he got none. "I like Remy and his mom. George does too," said Merganser. "Take care of them, will you?" "Of course I will." When they reached the lobby, Merganser took his walking stick and hat and ushered the ducks out of the elevator. They waddled in a perfect line past Remy and Blop, and the robot began talking about webbed feet and duck spills. "I'm going to miss our conversations," Merganser said as he passed by, and Blop turned at the sound of his voice, as if he somehow knew it would be the last time he'd hear it. Into the garden they went. The ducks, Mr. Whippet, and Leo Fillmore. Merganser took the black card out of his pocket, the one that had sent puzzle pieces flying. "If you want to reset the puzzle, click here, here, and then here. It's double-sided." "You mean there are 2 sides to the puzzle?" "Oh yes, of course there are. It's quite a secret, the other side. I don't suggest you see it for a while. You'll know when the time is right." They made a wide loop on the soft trails, drinking in the rolling hills of green grass. When they came to the pond, they saw Leo's dad and Pilar talking quietly. "I wonder where that will go, and how you will feel about it," asked Merganser. "I don't know, and I don't know," said Leo, "but I think it's going to be okay." "You're right. It's unwise to meddle in such things. Let nature take its course and all that." "By the way," said Leo, thinking back to the adventures he'd had, "where did you find my mother's ring?" Merganser laughed quietly. "You remember last year the trip you took? How could Leo forget? Yankees versus Red Sox. 3-game stand. Fenway Park. Your father wouldn't take an extra penny unless he worked for it, but those Fenway tickets," Merganser whistled through his teeth. "Expensive. And the train, the hotel, the hot dogs?" "He sold you the ring?" "Oh no, not sold, just collateral. There was no use trying to talk him out of it." Leo remembered the extra Saturdays his dad had been working ever since, all so they could take some time off and watch baseball together. They walked farther still toward the great black gate and passed by Mr. Phipps, trimming the green bushes into new and interesting shapes. "Could I request an elephant sometimes?" asked Leo. "Remy likes them." "Consider it done," said Mr. Phipps. He smiled, the old black freckles on his dark skin crumpling up against his eyes. "And you, sir, what will it be?" Merganser gazed over the grounds and found, at least for today, that it was just as it should be. "I think that one there on the end might make a good elephant, when the time is right." As you wish, Mr. Whippet. Keep Captain Rickenbacker occupied, will you?" Mr. Phipps held up his finger and wrote a check mark in the air, smiling wistfully. Somehow, without Leo really paying attention to how it had happened, they'd arrived at the gate to the hotel. It opened slowly, and the black town car pulled up. George Powell rolled down the window. "It's time for us to go," he said, as if they were late for something they'd been waiting all their lives to do. Merganser de-Whippet took in a deep breath and looked back at the hotel. Then he handed Leo the walking stick and took off his iridescent green jacket. "It's 10 sizes too big," said Leo, slimming in the jacket as Merganser draped it over his small shoulders. "I have a feeling you'll grow into it." The duck started to wander off toward the hotel, and Leo tapped the walking stick on the path. When he turned back to the gate, the car was pulling away. "If you need me," Merganser yelled from the back seat, Search the field of wacky inventions. The car pulled away and the gate closed. Leo scratched his head because he had no idea where the field of wacky inventions was, but he felt better knowing he could search for his old friend if he needed him, which he was sure he would. He was 10 and he owned a hotel. Not just any hotel, the Whippet. The strangest hotel in the world. There would be challenges, lots of them. Things would break. Miss Sparks might try to come back. Someone else would probably try to buy the hotel in order to build a skyscraper on the land. But Leo had his dad and a peaceful memory of his mother. There would be Pilar and Mr. Phipps, Captain Richtenbacher, Theodore Bump, Lillian Pompadour, and Betty. And there would be Remy. Leo wouldn't be doing this alone. He'd have plenty of help. Looking up at the Whippet Hotel, he decided what he would do first. He would take his dad, Pilar, Mr. Phipps, and Remy to the roof. And there, in the light of the morning sun, they would wave goodbye to Merganser D. Whippet. A duck quacked off in the distance, and Leo took chase, the Whippet Hotel rising to meet him, larger and closer as Merganser's green jacket trailed on the grass. "Do you think he'll be all right?" asked Merganser. He, too, was looking at the Whippet Hotel. It was getting smaller and smaller as they went. "I do," said George. "I do indeed. Maybe I should have mentioned the other floors. I think he probably knows enough for now." Merganser nodded, and a wide smile filled his face. "He's a good boy." "They both are," George agreed. The Whippet Hotel was almost out of sight, and Merganser began to feel free. He put his head out the window and let his hair blow in the wind. "A good day to be outside with the rabbits," he yelled. "Indeed it is," said George. They drove on out of the city, and the Whippet Hotel disappeared from view. And that, my friends, was the end of Floors. Looks like there's more for the Whippet Hotel. This was only book 1 of the series. There's 2 more books, as it's a trilogy, which means 3 books. I'm unsure if we'll read the other ones. We might switch to a different series. But if you liked this a lot, make sure to stop by the library. You can check out the other books so you can find out what other wacky adventures Leo and Remy get themselves in. I apologize for this being a bit of a longer episode, but I felt it was necessary to finish the book as it got really exciting there at the end. But thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed, and make sure to check in again next time. We do this Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I hope you will join me again. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.